Imagine being a Vatican priest, a man of deep faith, and upon dying, being taken to a place you could never have imagined. Hell. And even more shocking, seeing the Pope there. How is that possible? Get ready to hear the most incredible story of a near-death experience that will completely turn your vision of the afterlife upside down. Today, we will tell the story of a Vatican priest who went through a devastating near-death experience. During this ordeal, he claims to have witnessed something that no one would ever have imagined, least of all himself, the Pope, in a terrible place. But how is that possible? To understand this story, we need to go back in time and learn more about this priest's life, his faith, and what led him to that supernatural experience. The priest, who had spent his entire life as a devout member of the Catholic Church, never imagined that something like this could happen to him. He was used to talking about heaven and hell, but these discussions had always been mere theories to him. He had been trained from his youth to be an example of faith, living a disciplined life devoted to prayer and religious practice. However, his near-death experience made him question everything he knew about what really happens after death. When the priest went into cardiac arrest, the world around him vanished. He described the sensation as a sudden blackout, a deep plunge into a darkness that quickly enveloped him. At first there was no pain, only an absolute void. But soon he felt a growing pressure, as if he were being pulled toward a distant place. The silence was replaced by a constant sound of screams and lamentations, as if many souls around him were in agony. The environment seemed hot and suffocating, and the stench of decay hung in the air. It was not the place he had expected. As he delved deeper into that state, he felt as if he were being dragged into an entirely different dimension. There was no light, nor the celestial beauty he had imagined. The space was completely taken over by a heavy darkness, and a sense of despair and confusion overwhelmed his senses. When he tried to focus, he saw indistinct shapes all around him, figures of people who appeared lost, seemingly in eternal agony. According to the priest, these souls were familiar figures from his religious life, priests, bishops, and even other members of the church hierarchy he had known personally, now immersed in suffering. To him, it was a total shock. As the priest struggled to comprehend the reality of that environment and distance himself from the overwhelming terror, he began to perceive a distant figure. When he tried to approach, he was overcome by a disturbing sense of familiarity. Gradually, the figure began to take shape, and as he got closer, the priest was absolutely stunned. He recognized the man before him. It was the Pope, but not the Pope he knew, with his dignity and grace. The Pope the priest encountered in that place was in total suffering. The Pope's figure was shrouded in dense darkness, lacking the light that would normally symbolize purity and sanctity. Instead, the Pope appeared lost, desperate, and agonizing. The priest was paralyzed, speechless, not knowing how to react. He had never imagined he would see the Pope in such a situation, especially in such a terrible place. But as he watched, he noticed something even more disturbing. The Pope was undergoing a kind of purgation, surrounded by a negative energy that seemed to be draining his soul, as if he were being punished. At first, the priest tried to approach to speak with the Pope, but an invisible force prevented him from coming any closer. He felt as though he were being held back, as if a spiritual barrier separated him from the Pope, stopping any kind of interaction. The Pope seemed aware of the priest's presence, yet made no move to approach or speak. All the priest felt was a deep sadness emanating from the papal figure, something beyond his comprehension. He could not understand what the Pope was doing in that place. How could someone so holy be condemned to such a fate? The priest was stunned, unable to process what he was witnessing. Hell, as described in the scriptures, was a place of torment. Yet never in his worst nightmares had he imagined that a church leader, a central figure of faith, could be so far from salvation. The vision of the Pope in that place seemed to contradict everything the priest had learned about divine mercy, redemption, and the role of the church. He struggled to understand its meaning, but confusion overwhelmed him. He wanted to believe it was merely an illusion, a projection of his mind disturbed by the near-death experience, yet the intensity of the vision made him believe that it could not simply be the product of his imagination. As the priest continued to observe the Pope, he began to realize that something much more complex was happening. The Pope's presence in that environment of suffering did not seem to be a simple punishment or a mistaken judgment. There was a message there, something he needed to understand. With his religious training, the priest knew that messages from beyond can be deeply symbolic, and he felt that this vision was not just about the Pope's condition, but about something greater. The sense of despair in the Pope's presence in a place of suffering made him reflect on deep questions of faith, divine justice, and the church's role in salvation. While trying to understand the vision, the priest felt a strange sense of communication, as if there were a connection between him and the Pope. Without words, He couldn't explain it, but something inside him said that the Pope was there for reasons beyond personal condemnation. The priest felt as though the Pope was trying to convey something, a message or a warning, but he couldn't clearly grasp what it was. A weight of emotions enveloped him, and he felt challenged to question his own faith, his belief in the church, and the true meaning of redemption and forgiveness. Over time, the priest realized that hell was not simply a physical place, but a reflection of human failings, of the spiritual choices and omissions that every person may commit throughout life. He wondered whether the Pope was there due to a personal mistake, or if his presence in that place signified something greater, a metaphor for spiritual leaders who fail in their responsibilities toward the souls they guide. This reflection deeply disturbed him, but it also instilled a sense of urgency. He felt compelled to share this experience with the world so that people could question and reflect on the path of faith they were following. As the priest sank even deeper into the depths of this experience, he began to reflect on what he had seen. The Pope's presence in hell did not seem to be a direct punishment, but a representation of something much larger, something beyond his understanding. The experience of seeing the Pope in that place was not just about the failure of one person, but about the failure of an entire institution. The priest began to question what salvation truly means and who is truly capable of achieving redemption. He reflected on the nature of the Catholic Church and the role of spiritual leadership in the salvation of souls. That vision made him question the Church's failings in many areas, especially regarding internal corruption and the distancing from the true teachings of Christ. The priest pondered how some spiritual leaders were more concerned with power and status than with the salvation of the souls under their care. He felt that the experience was trying to show him that even those who consider themselves closest to God can fail, and that the path to salvation is not as simple as many believe. At the same time, the priest could not understand why the Pope was in that place of suffering. Was it a punishment, or was it a warning? The sensation of being in the presence of something divine and inexplicable left him restless. He knew that this experience would change his view of everything he believed. There was something there, something deep and mysterious, that challenged him to look beyond traditional doctrine and seek a more complex truth, something beyond human comprehension. The priest felt that this experience was not just about him, but about the Church as a whole, and about how every individual, including spiritual leaders, is responsible for their actions. In time, the near-death experience began to subside, and the priest felt that he was being called to leave that dark place. He described how, slowly, the pressure that had held him began to lessen, and he started to feel a sense of lightness, as if he were being lifted. However, before leaving that place, one final vision deeply marked him. He saw the Pope again, but this time the figure was different. He was no longer in agony, but in a kind of silent contemplation. The Pope's expression, though still full of sadness, appeared more resigned, as if he were accepting the fate imposed upon him. This left the priest with a profound sense of reflection, as if the Pope had found peace in the acceptance of his failure or mistake. Yet the main message the priest took from that encounter was not just about the condemnation of one man, but about the spiritual condition of humanity in general. He felt that deep down, everyone is subject to the same judgment, regardless of their social or spiritual status. When the priest finally returned to his body, he felt as if he were being pulled back to reality, as if his experience had come to an end. He awoke in the hospital, in a state of shock, with the feeling that everything he had experienced was something he would never fully understand. However, he knew that the vision he had seen was real in some way, and that he could no longer ignore the profound spiritual questions it had raised. The priest knew that his mission now would be to share his experience with the world and to encourage people to reflect on their own spiritual lives. He did not know exactly what the future held for him, but one thing was clear: his faith would never be the same again. After waking from the coma, the priest spent weeks reflecting on his experience. He knew that the vision was not just a simple near-death experience, but a divine calling, a message that transcended any human understanding. What he saw challenged his deepest beliefs, causing him to question the Church's practices, the role of religious leaders, and even the true nature of salvation. There was no longer any doubt in his mind that spiritual truth is not something simple, and that the path to heaven or hell is not determined solely by external actions, but by the state of the heart and soul. During this period of reflection, the priest sought to understand the presence of the Pope in that place. He concluded that the vision of the Pope in hell was, in part, a metaphor, representing how even the highest spiritual leaders must be in constant vigilance regarding their own actions and choices. The vision wasn't condemning a specific person, but showing that no one is free from mistakes or failings. Even the most devout are subject to God's judgment, and each individual must seek truth, humility, and the purification of their spirit, regardless of their position. The priest then decided to share his experience with others. He began to speak about what he had seen and learned, encouraging people to deepen their faith in a more authentic and introspective manner. He did not want anyone to view his story as an accusation, but rather as an invitation to reflect. He knew that regardless of human failings, salvation was accessible to everyone if they were willing to seek forgiveness and truth with a pure heart. Above all, he came to understand that what truly matters is the sincerity of one's faith, the connection with the divine, and the constant pursuit of a virtuous life, regardless of one's status in the world. The priest's near-death experience not only transformed him spiritually, but also made him realize the importance of living with responsibility, humility, and respect for each person's spiritual journey. He knew that his mission was now to share this message so that others might reflect on their choices and the paths they were following. For him, faith was no longer a matter of dogmas or appearances, but a true quest for redemption and an understanding of the purpose of our existence. Now that you know this extraordinary story, we'd love to hear your opinion. What do you believe about life after death? The priest's experience and his vision of the Pope and hell challenge everything we thought we knew about salvation. Leave your thoughts in the comments below and share this video with your friends. The priest's experience makes us question our own beliefs and our spiritual journeys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more impactful stories about near-death experiences and what they can teach us about life, death, and the beyond. See you in the next video.